I discovered the haunted wedding celebration where the bride's dark secret unraveled. I never should have opened that door. It creaked ominously as I pushed it, the sound echoing in the dead silence of the long-abandoned hall. The air was thick with dust, and the musty smell clung to my throat. I could almost hear whispers, muffled and distant, swirling around me, as if the very walls were alive with secrets that I had been drawn here, against my better judgment. The town was abuzz with tales of the old mansion where a wedding had taken place decades ago. A celebration that had turned to horror on what was supposed to be the happiest day of two people's lives. The bride, beautiful, radiant, was said to have vanished that night. Just like that, poof. Gone. No one knew where she went, and no one spoke of it. Curiosity gnawed at me as I surveyed the setting. The room was dim, lit only by slivers of moonlight streaming through cracked windows. Shadows danced across the walls, stretching and contracting like ghostly figures caught in a trance. I shivered, not just from the cold air, but from a strange sense of dread that seemed to seep into my bones. I could have sworn I felt eyes watching me. I turned abruptly, my heart racing, but I was alone. Suddenly, I heard a low thump from the far corner. My stomach twisted. What was that? I took a cautious step forward, the old floorboards creaking under my weight. The noise came again. Was it the wind? Or something more sinister? My breath quickened, and I felt that familiar weight in my chest. I could almost see her now, the bride standing there in her wedding dress, pale and ethereal, her eyes filled with sorrow. A chill ran down my spine. I pushed the thought away. This was just an old story, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling. I wanted to back away, to flee into the safety of the night. But something compelled me forward. Maybe it was the memories of laughing guests, the echoes of vows whispered into the ether, or perhaps the allure of the mystery surrounding her fate. As I moved deeper into the room, my skin prickled. The whispers grew louder, weaving in and out of my thoughts. It felt as though the very walls were alive, ready to share their tragic tale. Then, with a crash, a door slammed shut behind me, sending me sprawling. Panic surged through me. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding like a wild drum. What was happening? I turned back, eyes darting. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker. I could hear my own breath, the only sound in that suffocating space. And then a figure materialized, wreathed in darkness, eyes gleaming. A scream clawed at my throat, but it wouldn't come. The bride? Or a haunting? I froze, fear wrapping its icy fingers around my neck. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure drew closer, stepping into a slant of moonlight, revealing a gaunt frame draped in a tattered wedding gown that fluttered as if caught in a phantom breeze. The fabric, once white and elegant, was now a grim testament to decay, brown and mottled with stains that could only suggest unspeakable horrors. Her face, an eerie mask of sorrow, glistened with tears that did not dry, mingled with a chilling brightness that seemed to illuminate the darkness around her. I stumbled back, feeling the rough wall scrape against my skin. She opened her mouth, but no words spilled forth, only a whisper of anguish that wrapped around me, tightening like a noose. In that moment, I could almost feel her despair suffocating me, pressing down until I gasped for air. A sudden flicker of movement drew my attention to the corner of the room where the sound had originated. Frozen with dread, I tried to steady my breathing, hoping it was merely a trick of the light. But a small, trembling figure emerged from the shadows, further igniting my terror. It was a child, perhaps no older than 6, her hair unkempt and eyes wide with an unsettling mix of fear and longing. She wore a dirt-smudged gown that mirrored the bride's, but her small frame radiated innocence against the backdrop of ruin. "Help her," the child whimpered with a voice so faint it barely broke the silence. "She needs you." Her tiny hand lifted, pointing towards the bride. My heart thudded against my ribcage, a warning of the path I was being beckoned to tread. I glanced back at the bride, her expression shifting from sorrow to something darker, an unmistakable plea mixed with a predatory hunger. I shook my head, the instinct to run surging fiercely. But the child stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine with a depth that felt impossibly ancient. "You don't have to be afraid," she said softly, though her tone betrayed the eerie serenity of the scene. "Please don't leave her." Then the room shifted. The air grew heavier, a thick miasma that wrapped itself around me, restricting movement and clouding my mind. Shapes emerged from the shadows, figures twisting and writhing, their forms indistinguishable apart from the flickering moonlight, designs stitched into their translucent skin, the faces of the guests who once celebrated here, their screams forever trapped in a silent wail. "Join us," they whispered in unison, their voices a haunting melody that stirred something deep within my core. I felt the walls closing in, the room pulsating with energy that was both repulsive and intoxicating. The flickering lights of the room were now engulfed in ghostly flames, and I was caught between the living and the damned. "Please," the child urged again, sounding desperate, the plea echoing in the cacophony of tormented souls. "You must remember her." Just as I thought my feet might give way, the bride turned sharply, glancing at me with eyes that brimmed with madness and sorrow. With the faintest gesture, she beckoned me to approach. My heart raced as I could sense a darkness rising around us, a promise of secrets that were far deeper than what had been told in hushed whispers. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the decay of the mansion reverberated in an ear-splitting roar. An unseen force thrust me toward the center of the room, the ground beneath me rumbling like a living creature. I could barely comprehend the child's wide eyes, now filled with terror as she screamed, "Don't let them take you." In a split second, the world around me twisted violently, spiraling into an unfathomable abyss, the walls cracking and dissolving into a void where darkness reigned. With every ounce of willpower, I reached out, grasping for something solid amid the madness, desperate to escape, but then, a sharp snap sounded, cutting through my thoughts. The lights flickered violently, and everything went dark. I was plunged into silence, and just as suddenly, an icy breath exhaled against my ear, filling my mind with visions of the bride, the child, and the party guests, now all entwined in eternal torment, and in the blackness, I felt them all reaching for me. In that oppressive void, I stood paralyzed, my heart a frantic drum in the dead silence. The cold breath that had brushed against my ear stirred something primordial within me, compelling my instincts to flee. Yet as I turned, I caught an unsettling glimpse of the child, her frail hand now extended into the darkness, trembling but unwaveringly fixed on an unseen presence. Suddenly, the ground heaved with an earth-shattering force. I stumbled, my feet caught in an unseen grasp, and felt the very essence of the room coiling tightly around my ankles. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, breathing, and hungry, pulling me deeper into its insatiable maw. The chilling whispers of the wedding guests grew louder, merging into a frenzied chorus of despair, wailing accusations and pleas, the air thick with remorse, betrayal, and an overwhelming urge for justice. "Help her!" The child cried again, her voice echoing in the blackness, igniting a flicker of urgency within me. I reached out, desperate to pull her to safety, but before I could grasp her hand, the darkness grew thicker, suffocating my resolve. I could feel her fear wrapping around me, a palpable thing that clawed at my spirit. Then, without warning, a blinding light erupted around us, illuminating the room in a ghostly glow. I turned to behold the gaunt bride standing before me, her face twisted in a haunting expression of longing and rage. The pearl-like tears that glistened on her cheeks formed rivulets of shadow that dripped onto the floor, each drop giving birth to writhing tendrils, ghostly arms stretching out towards the child and me, yearning to entwine us in their cold embrace. No! I screamed, lurching backwards. But the walls of the room spun, twisting the very fabric of reality around us. My surroundings morphed into the chaotic backdrop of a wedding celebration, the laughter of the guests now a foreboding melody filled with malice. Their faces transformed, twisting grotesquely into masks of torment. The festive decorations pulsed with a sickly vibrancy, as though they were stewing in a broth of despair. The child's small hand slipped from my grasp as she was drawn forward, her eyes wide and pleading. "You promised you wouldn't leave her." Tears streamed down her face, but the shadows around her began to swirl, encasing her. I felt a searing heat at my back, a warning that something dreadful was imminent. As I stumbled to reclaim her, the bride extended an arm, her long fingers curling downward like beckoning talons. The wailing of the guests surged, melding with the sounds of shattering glass and the cracking of wood, a symphony of events spiraling into chaos. "Join us," she commanded, her voice now a cacophony of anguish and longing, a contrast to the grim resolve in her gaze. Without warning, the floor beneath us split open, an abyss revealing a swirling vortex of darkness that beckoned like a siren, promising freedom from the agony enveloping us. The bride's eyes glimmered with an unsettling light as she whispered, "You will understand once you join the dance." A horrified gasp escaped my lips as I realized the truth beneath her words. The celebration was not merely a memory or a haunting, it was a ritual, one that demanded sacrifice. I looked to the child, whose body was now entrapped in the tendrils, her cries melding with the chaos around us, pleading, begging. That I struggled against the grasp of the shadowy figures that began to rise from the fissure, their hollow eyes fixated on me, their desires entwined with the very fabric of my fear. The bride's smile widened, a malevolent curve that sent a chill down my spine. "Join us, and remember, or be lost forever." In that moment of paralyzing despair, I felt the pull of the void, the darkness swirling like a tempest, threatening to consume every flicker of life. An icy grip wrapped around my throat as screams of the past echoed through my mind, lost loves, broken vows, and unspeakable horrors clawing their way back to the surface. With trembling hands, I reached for the child, but before I could make contact, a deafening silence suddenly enveloped us, as if the world had exhaled. The shadows hung in anticipation, and the bride's expectant gaze bore into my soul. Then the darkness stirred, revealing a pair of burning eyes, not belonging to the bride or the child, but to a much darker entity lurking just beyond the veil, a presence that knew me, that desired me. And with that terrifying realization, the last thing I saw was the child's terrified face, her scream echoing in my ears as the world fell away beneath me, dragging us both into a darkness so profound that I lost all sense of self. There, at the edge of reason, I was left empty, drowning in the abyss, grasping at the last threads of sanity as I awaited the unveiling of what lay beyond. As I plunged deeper into the abyss, time became a meaningless blur. Thoughts twisted and turned like a storm raging in my mind, tethered to the echo of the child's scream, reverberating endlessly. The cold seeped into my bones, an insidious chill that gnawed at the fragile remnants of my consciousness. Darkness danced around me, teasing the edges of my sanity, whispering of forgotten tragedies that now swirled like smoke in the corners of my thoughts. That I suddenly found myself at the center of the chaos. The faded glow of the wedding lights sparked to life, illuminating a grand hall where the remnants of a celebration lingered, utterly warped by despair. The air was thick with a cloying sweetness, a perverse contrast to the rancid stench of decay, a sickening reminder that the joyous occasion had long since turned grotesque. Tables laden with rotting food, toppled champagne flutes still glistening, their contents curdled and blackened, littered the ground like silent witnesses to the horror unfolding around me. I stood amidst these artifacts of revelry, trapped within a tableau of dread. The guests, now mere shades of their former selves, congregated in huddled masses, whispering among themselves in hushed tones, their eyes devoid of life and hope. The music that had once accompanied their laughter had soured, punctuated by a haunting melody that echoed through the hall, persistently tugging at the edges of my memory. Each note seemed to stab at me, drawing from the depths of pain and longing trapped within their spectral forms. The bride's face loomed out of the shadows, forever etched into the recesses of my mind. Her eyes glinted with a sadistic glee, as if every grain of her sorrow was now turned to a weapon against me. "You should feel honored," she crooned, her voice tangible and prickly as though it could crawl beneath my skin. "You've been chosen to witness the ultimate pact, the price of love and the depths of betrayal." The floor trembled as she twirled in a grotesque dance, her wedding gown fluttering like the wings of a trapped moth. Each spin drew the tendrils of darkness close, sinuous and alive, enveloping her with eager anticipation. I glanced around desperately, hoping to catch a glimpse of the child, but only saw fragments of her laughter hauntingly intertwining with the terrible chords of the music that thrummed through the air. The guests, their visages shifting like smoke in a breeze, began to move in rhythm to the dreadful song. They danced in unison, their faces painted with agony, their bodies rigid yet moving as if compelled by some unseen force. I felt the weight of their sorrow pressing against me, the grief of their unfulfilled desires coiling tightly around my heart. I wanted to scream, to break free from the suffocating atmosphere, but the shadows tugged at me, drawing me ever closer to the center of this macabre carousel. "Dance with us," one shadowed figure rasped, its face shifting in and out of recognition. "Join the celebration of despair, of euphoria birthed from death." The voice was familiar, echoing fragments of a past that threatened to drown me as I felt a vortex of memories swirl around my mind. Strained smiles, desperate love letters ripped apart by misunderstandings, the smell of burnt toast at dawn. I gasped for breath, struggling against the tide of memories, collapsing to my knees on the warped floor. I could feel cold fingers brushing against my back, a beckoning touch that promised relief from the nightmares, yet pulled me deeper into the throes of fear. "Help her." A voice pierced through my own wretched thoughts, and there was the child, her face at once radiant and shattered. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her small hands clawing at the shadows in vain, trying to push them away. I could see her lips moving, forming words that were lost amid the cacophony of writhing bodies and moaning spirits. In that moment, the realization struck hard like lightning. Their dance was not merely for celebration but a twisted cycle, a ritual bound to the essence of despair that enveloped the mansion. If I did not act, she would be ensnared forever, a permanent participant in their mournful masquerade. The bride's gaze locked onto mine, her twisted grin widening into something monstrous. "Are you willing to pay the price?" Her words echoed, the weight of their implication crashing down like a ton of bricks. To save the child, would have to offer everything: me pain, my memories, and perhaps even my soul. A pulse of defiance surged through me, igniting barely noticed embers of strength buried beneath layers of fear. My heart thudded violently as I pushed myself to my feet, breaking free from the ghostly embrace of despair. But as I did, the shadowed figures turned toward me, faces morphing, guilt and anger written across their twisted features. "Join us." They shouted in unison, their voices a hellish symphony that shrieked of lost dreams and shattered promises. I felt it then, the suffocating grip of countless hands grabbing at me, drawing me toward the chaotic dance of the damned. I launched myself forward, desperate to reach the child, but the shadows swirled, ensnaring me tighter. The bride laughed, the sound like shattered glass. "You cannot escape the dance of fate." Just as I was prepared to be swallowed whole, a flash of clarity sparked within me, and I caught the child's gaze, her eyes, wide and brimming with tears, shining like beacons of hope against the darkness. I called out to her one last time, "Hold on. I'll find you." But as I stepped forward, I felt a searing pain, a wicked thorn of memory plunging through me. A moment of my past I thought long buried, but which now rose up to greet me in the clutches of darkness. My breath caught. Momentarily overwhelmed by the memories, I faltered. As the shadows reached for me, something shifted in the depths of the crowd. A figure appeared, silhouetted against the swirling shadows, an ethereal glow, an anguished face finally recognizable. A familiar presence, whispering a name I had long since forgotten, beckoning forth from the darkness. "Don't let them take you. Don't let it end like this." I stood suspended between the two worlds, my heart racing, straddling the line between salvation and damnation. But suddenly, just as I steadied my resolve, a heavy hand gripped my shoulder from behind, hot, rancid breath hissing in my ear. "You will stay, you will remember forever." And with that, the world around me shattered, the fragments of light scattering to black, plunging me into an unfathomable darkness where no one could hear my screams. The oppressive darkness thickened, almost tangible, wrapping around me like barbed wire. Panic surged as I struggled against the unseen hands that pulled me deeper into the inky abyss. Each breath felt heavier, the air thickening like molasses, and as I gasped for freedom, I could feel my heart pounding in time with the distant drum of that macabre wedding song. The child, trapped in the throes of celebration turned imprisonment, flickered in and out of my vision like a specter caught in a haunting memory. I screamed for her, my voice a brittle shard that seemed to dissolve before it reached her ears. Desperation clawed at my throat, urging me to fight against the pull of shadows that sought to consume me. Just as the memories threatened to engulf me once more, a scream ripped through the stillness, a petrified cry echoing against the hall's warped walls, ricocheting in spirals until it vanished into the vacant corners where the shadows breathed. It was not just any scream, it was a call to arms, a wake-up from the trance that gripped the ghostly celebration. I turned sharply, seeking out the source, but found only the faceless specters swirling around me, their relentless movement adding to the swirling chaos. "Stop!" I roared, forcing my voice to break against the grim chorus. The shadows hesitated, momentarily startled by the force of my declaration. Their twisted forms quivered as they shifted, like a giant, grotesque wave paused in time. The bride's laughter rang out, a cruel sound that sliced through my thoughts, reminding me of the sinister power she wielded over her guests, a dictator in a sea of sorrow. "Do you truly believe you can command them?" she taunted, stepping forward from her throne of darkness. In that moment, her beauty shone through the shadows, twisted but captivating, the perfect embodiment of sorrow and madness. "I don't want to command anyone," I replied, my voice finding a surprising strength. "But I'll fight for her. I'll fight for all of you." A ripple spread through the dance of the guests, a flicker of something resembling hope cutting through the despair. This reaction was not unnoticed. The bride's face soured with rage, her ethereal features darkening as shadows thickened around her. "You will regret this insolence," she hissed, raising an arm overhead, and in response, the shadowy figures jolted as if she held dominion over them. "Think carefully, child," the bride continued, her voice seductive yet venomous. "You can either join our blissful embrace of the eternal dance, where ecstasy and agony intertwine, or you can choose the path of pain and suffering, a path which leads nowhere." Each word dripped with malice, weaving a toxic web that demanded my submission. "What is left for me if I choose despair?" I countered, my heart thundering as I sought to anchor myself against the tide of anguish swirling within the hall. The child looked at me, her wide eyes filled with desperate longing, and I knew then that I could not abandon her to this nightmare. The bride's expression shifted ever so slightly, as if curious about my resolve. "What will you sacrifice to break the cycle you see before you? Your memories? Your sanity? Or something far more precious than that, your very essence?" Before I could respond, the shadows surrounding me surged, fingers like icy tendrils snaked around my limbs, pulling me into a swirling vortex of horror. The music crescendoed, each note spinning faster and louder, drowning out the last vestiges of rational thought. The faces of the guests twisted around me, their mouths twitching in silent screams, a vexing melody of lost hopes and shattered dreams. Suddenly, a figure broke through the Crodan, ethereal presence brighter than the surrounding darkness. It moved with purpose, drawing closer, and amidst the chaos, I finally recognized her, my grandmother, her features kissed by age yet radiating warmth. "You must leave this place," she cried, reaching a hand toward me with a desperate urgency. "Help her," I shouted, pointing at the child, who had sunk to her knees, the weight of despair pinning her down against the cold floor. But as my grandmother stepped forward, her face contorting in terror, the bride wrapped a shadowy tendril around her wrist, yanking her back into the gathering storm of lost souls. "Do you think she can save you?" she cooed, spinning the darkness into grotesque shapes. "Everyone here has made their choice. You will too." Terror clawed at my throat as the shadows turned their attention to me once more, the noise swelling, a cacophony of sobs and laughter merging into a nightmarish symphony. I felt myself slipping away, lost between worlds, teetering on the edge of oblivion. In a moment of sheer desperation, with tears streaming down my face, I strained against the darkness, raising my voice above the monstrous choir. "I am not afraid," I declared, each word ringing with a power I hadn't known I possessed. The shadows shuddered as I released that truth into the air. The bride recoiled, the rage in her eyes turning to disbelief. But before I could seize the moment, the shadows writhed and coiled tighter, as if summoned by her fury, sending a shockwave of dread through the hall. The ground beneath me trembled violently, and from the abyss of forsaken dreams, a low, rumbling voice emerged from the depths. "Your choice is made, then." It growled, an ancient menace resonating in the dark. "Prepare to bear the weight of eternity." Fragments of light scattered as the shadows swelled, and the air crackled with a palpable energy. I stood frozen, caught in the crossfire between fear and resolve, between light and dark. But just as I felt the ground give way beneath me, and the shadows lunged forward to claim their prize, everything shattered. Light burst forth, piercing the darkness like 1,000 suns, surrounding me in an intoxicating warmth. And in that blinding moment, I realized the choice was never mine alone to make. In the swirling chaos, something far darker than I could anticipate whispered into my ear, a promise I knew I would regret. "Embrace your fate, for it is more than you knew." And stands just behind you. The light began to dim, revealing what might be the end, or perhaps the beginning of something new, as the darkness writhed once more around me, ready to unveil its own ghastly secret. The light flickered, transmuting into shadows that elongated and swirled with sinister intent. The faces of the guests contorted further, their hollow eyes boring into me as if I were the centerpiece of their morbid feast. The bride commanded not just their reverence, but their suffering, and now, it was my turn to give in or face the consequences. That I felt the cold breath of despair brush against my nape, and for a brief moment, the visions of my grandmother's fading figure burgeoned inside my mind. I could hear her voice, a comforting echo now clashing against the chaotic shards of my reality. "Fear not what you cannot control," she whispered, a phantom of courage against the onslaught of unease, but this emboldened whisper was rapidly drowned out by the twisting cacophony that resonated from the corners of the hall. The darkness threatened to engulf my thoughts, clawing at the edges of my sanity. The bride, now a silhouette of malevolent grace, extended a finger towards me. "Free yourself from the burdens of reality," she commanded, her voice dripping with frenzy. "Let go and become more." As if the command spawned life, the shadows parted momentarily, revealing a portal at the far end of the hall. It pulsated rhythmically, exuding a haunting glow that beckoned toward the unknown. A siren song wrapped around me, invading my thoughts and igniting a desire to escapedo, join the eternal dance of twisted souls. Yet, the child's frightened expression pierced through my fog of indecision. No. I cried out, my heart resounding with the primal instinct to save her. "I refuse. I refuse to abandon anyone." With my voice lifted against the tide of darkness, the shadows recoiled briefly before surging back with an unholy ferocity. Frantically, I turned to the child, and there it was, the flicker of a shared understanding beneath our souls. She could see the truth. She could feel the pulse of humanity still lingering amidst this celebration of horrors, and she began to rise, motes of strength igniting within her eyes. "Together," she shouted, her voice a fragile but fervent thread weaving through the oppressive atmosphere. With our combined fervor radiating like sparks, the shadows erupted in a fierce cacophony of screams, a tempest of bitterness and anger swirling towards the portal. The bride's expression twisted into a mask of rage, her beauty now grotesque in its fury. "You dare resist?" she hissed, eyes ablaze with ancient power. In a quaking rush, tendrils of darkness shot towards us, seizing the air with an iron grip. I could visualize a thin veil parting as the shadows surged forward, a gaping maw of terror and despair, but we stood resolute. "Fight it," I urged, the child nodding fiercely as we channeled the remnants of our hope into a protective barrier between ourselves and the emerging darkness. Yet, just as the veil flickered, displacing reality as we knew it, the low rumbling voice returned with a guttural intensity. "You cannot change what was destined, child. You belong to the darkness." The air crackled with a piercing energy, igniting a whirlwind of emotions that whirled dizzyingly around us. I could see flashes of faces flickering in and out within the shadows, the anguish, the joy, the memories hijacked and twisted in a grotesque ballet. They clawed at my heart, and deep down, I felt the weight of their despair. They were trapped, just like we were. "Please," I whispered into the chaos, feeling this was not just a fight for my survival, but for all the flickering souls dancing beneath the bride's cruel reign. We deserve to be free. The shadows hesitated, as if my utterance stirred something primal within them. The tendrils slithered, watching us with uncertain malevolence. Perhaps, just perhaps, there existed a sliver of humanity tethered to the darkness, driven by an urgency now ignited deep within my soul. I stepped forward, arms wide open as the shadows wriggled closer, surrounding me. "You can take me instead," I offered, my voice quaking yet steady. Let her go. For a moment, silence engulfed the hall, the impending storm of chaos stirring as fear and hope collided. Then, in a terrible rush, the shadows converged, encasing me in their feral embrace. My heart raced, not with panic, but with a resolute determination as I sensed the weight behind my choice heavy in the air, a sacrifice that could unravel the bonds of despair that held us all captive. And in that dark embrace, as reality began to slip away, the bride's laughter broke through, echoing with triumphant malice. "Foolish child! You believe yourself worthy of the ultimate choice." And suddenly, I knew with chilling finality what she intended. Even as I felt the pull of darkness tugging me down, a shriek filled the air. The child's scream roared louder than before, it sent shards of fear rattling through my core. "No!" I cried, but it was too late. The shadows consumed me, dragging me into the heart of an unearthly realm, where I could hear the haunting melody of lost souls intertwining with the oppressive weight of their choice. As I drifted, I felt the cold grasp of despair tighten around my throat, and just when I thought that everything was lost, an eerie silence enveloped the hall. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in the center of the now lifeless celebration, souls frozen in time, watching me expectantly. And amongst them, now materializing with a chilling clarity, stood the bride, her smile stretched impossibly wide, an echo of an unspeakable horror rippling through her essence. "Welcome to the eternity you chose," she said, and behind her, a twisted expanse of shadow loomed, a gate forged from sorrow and regret. In that moment, I realized there was a darker truth awaiting discovery, one buried deep within the bride's twisted heart, a secret that could either bind us forever or reveal the monstrous realization that I had merely stepped into the beginning of my own undoing. And just as the shadows threatened to close in for the kill, the walls echoed once more, "Choose wisely, for all secrets shall be revealed." I felt a change in the atmosphere, a thickening of the air that crackled with a mournful energy. The stillness of the room was grotesquely deceptive, teetering on the edge of something primal, something terrible. The guests remained frozen, their silent eyes fixated on me, waiting for the next act of this twisted performance, as if I were a player destined to play a role I did not wish to embrace. The bride's malice lingered, echoing in the vastness of the hall. "You think you've made a choice," she taunted, her voice reverberating through the stillness, weaving through my thoughts like a serpent. "But choices are merely illusions, darling. It is the consequence that reveals your true path." With a swift motion, she waved her hand and the guests began to tremble, the deceptive stillness shattering into chaos. Phantom laughter erupted, mingling with anguished shouts that seemed to ripple through the very walls. The opulent decorations, once a testament to grandeur, began to decay before my eyes, flowers withering, the fabric of the tablecloths rotting, and the air thick with the scent of decay. "Welcome to the reception of horrors," the bride proclaimed, her voice blending with the cacophony of misery. I could feel the pulse of the room, thrumming with agony, a rhythmic heartbeat that resonated with every pulse of my own frantic thought. A wave of dread washed over me as I realized my surroundings were changing a dreadful metamorphosis. The walls, once adorned with beauty, began to bleed shadows, seeping a liquid darkness that dripped onto the floor like a primordial ooze. The joyous music turned besiege, morphing into a morbid symphony of wails and cries. Each note echoed my fears, bouncing off the walls and magnifying the reckoning that awaited me. "Don't you see?" the bride whispered conspiratorially, gliding through the freezing air with an unsettling grace. "You've joined this feast by accident, but you were chosen long ago." Her eyes glinted with ancient knowledge, holding secrets older than time itself. "You'll soon realize everyone here shares their own story of loss, regret, and a yearning for forgiveness." My heart pounded in response, each thump a reminder of my own frailty. The illusions of freedom flickered like dying embers, coloring my thoughts with panic. I glanced at the guests, their expressions morphing into sorrowful reflections of their trapped souls. Behind the frozen smiles lay wretched narratives of lives once lived, now tangled in the bride's cruel grasp. Then, as if in response to my mounting horror, the guests began to writhe, their forms contorting unnaturally, stretching as if trying to escape their spectral prisons. I could feel their despair like a hot wind, clamoring at my edges, roaring to be heard. Words that echoed through time seared into my mind, "Unravel the secret, child. Only then will you break the curse that binds us." Compelled by an instinct buried deep within, I stepped closer, enticed by the specters of pain and yearning that shadowed the bride's cruel halo. "What secret?" I implored, voice trembling but resolute. "What do I need to know?" The bride paused, a flicker of intrigue crossing her grotesque features. "Ah, you're clever to seek the truth," she crooned, the shadows danced eagerly around her like playful spirits. "But no, little one, you cannot comprehend its depths. You are but a flicker of light in this void." Suddenly, shadows surged violently around me as the guests turned their gaze from me to the bride, their eyes emanating a plead for liberation that twisted a knife in my heart. "Look closer, discover what lies beneath," they murmured in unison, and I felt the weight of responsibility crashing over me. I was the only one who could wrest free their tether to this nightmarish existence. As I delved deeper into the depths of the bride's malevolence, I could sense something shifting in the ether, an energy swirling with both promise and damnation. Was I truly willing to unearth what lay hidden? A pair of glowing eyes pierced through the rapidly thickening shadows, the child from before her ethereal form flickering. "You must, please," she cried, her voice like shattered glass. "You can't leave us here." With an inner call to arms, I confronted the bride, an overwhelming surge of determination steadying my breath. "What is your secret? Tell me," I demanded, pushing through the crushing despair that threatened to suffocate my resolve, and then I saw a flash of memories that flashed before my eyes like a broken film reel. The bride, once a luminous vision of joy standing in a different hall, surrounded by people filled with life and laughter, the knife plunged into her heart, and those she loved becoming shadows of their former selves. Betrayal living in echoes. Her laughter enveloped me, sharp as glass and just as dangerous. "So naive," she bellowed. "It is not my secret to unveil, it is a choice. You either take the plunge or bear the consequences of all who love and lose." In that chilling moment, I felt a compelling force twisting my fate, and dread rippled through the room, climbing impossibly towards a crescendo. I faced her, heart pounding, ready to communicate the very conspiracy that lay behind the gaudy facade, but before I could utter another word, the shadows began to howl, their wails escalating into an anguished crescendo. Everything blurred as the realization hit me like a violent wave. The sacrifice had never been mine to give. It was the bride's own, and now, in this moment of revelation, she bore down on me with terrifying hunger. "Choose. The night is waning, the truth has no mercy," she hissed, as laughter filled the hall, intertwined with growing despair. Around me, the shadows vibrated and the air thickened with malignant energy, the world unfurling into a kaleidoscope of darkness, and then, with a chilling prompt one that echoed the room's sorrow, the shadows aligned underfoot, shimmering like pools of ink, and an unbearable weight pressed down as they whispered, "Reveal the truth or become one of us." In that high-stakes moment, time fractured, and silence descended, before everything trembled with an uncanny intensity that shattered reality itself. I could feel the line blurring between who I was, and what I was yet to become. Would I uncover the dark threads that bound this entire place, or would I fall prey to her echoing darkness, where no light could reach? And just then, as the shadows encircled tighter, the chilling laughter of the bride rang out one last time, piercing sharper than any blade, dripping with sinister delight. "Welcome to your purgatory. Choose wisely, for there is no turning back." And in that eternal moment of impending dread, I realized I stood at the threshold of an abyss so profound that the only way lay through, to either rise or lose everything, engulfed forever in the nightmare awaiting my final choice. The laughter that erupted echoed like a sinister symphony, reverberating through the grotesque hall that had become a vivid and terrible painting of sorrow. The specters danced around me, their movements grotesque and alien, distorting as they pulled against the invisible threads binding them to this forsaken place. They watched, their hollow eyes pleading, mouths stretched into grim smiles that held no hint of warmth, only the cold, bitter sting of lost hope. The twists of fate painted themselves vividly in my mind. The bride's joyous past clawed its way to the surface like crucial truths buried beneath the weight of dread. I could almost see her then, radiant, talking softly to her guests, welcoming them into a celebration draped in pure bliss. But that vision twisted, shadows creeping in like ink spreading across a page, smothering the light of her recollection until all that remained was a figure shrouded in despair and vengeance. Do you feel it? One of the guests rasped, straining against their spectral binds. The darkness of your choices lurking just beyond the veil, gnashing its teeth with unquenchable hunger. My heart raced at the collective realization. The weight of their stories poured into me, a troubling tide threatening to drown my resolve. I was not merely an observer, I was entwined in this cruel tapestry of fate, my fate bound to their anguish. I could feel their lives, fragments of memories merging into a singular, dreadful truth. I had to act, to choose, but the chilling laughter of the bride twisted my thoughts into pathways of confusion and hysteria. Choose. She echoed, with each syllable piled onto the tension that hummed in the air like a noxious fog. Your choice will resonate through time, echoing in the wails of the damned. Will you unravel the secret, or will you be forever lost in this macabre mirage? Just tell me what I need to do. I cried out, the strength of my voice cutting through the suffocating dread, a tremor of defiance fueled by desperation for clarity. She drifted closer, and the light dimmed around her, an oppressive shadow swallowing more of the hall as if harnessing her malicious energy. Every soul here carries a burden, a loss, a betrayal. But there lies a darker truth, just beneath the surface of this night. The oath they took, the promises they shattered, linger here like ghosts unbound. You, dear child, must face the truth that breathes life into the shadows. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted again, the air crackling as if charged with raw energy ready to unleash its power. The guests began to writhe in unison, their bodies stretching and twisting grotesquely, the lines of their features twisting into silent screams, their mouths forming the words, "It lives within you, take it and set us free." I backed away instinctively, my pulse hammering like a wild drum. My instincts screamed at me to flee, run from this nightmare, escape the cavernous maw of despair. But here I was, at a crossroads where flight would only tether their lost souls further into helplessness. What do you mean it lives within me? I gasped, struggling to push through the suffocating dread that submerged my thoughts. One of the lost souls, cloaked in a veil of darkness, broke free of the spectral locks binding it to the ground. We were all once like you, alive, vibrant until we fell victim to her deceit. The choices we made woven together, are echoes of the love we once shared. But the truth has power, it can unshackle you, redeem you if you dare to embrace it. Embrace what? I hissed, panic prickling at my skin as her presence surrounded me like a predator stalking its prey. What truth? The bride raised a hand, her expression sharp and predatory, the flickering shadows weaving about her form growing denser. Oh, sweet child. The truth is pain, it is sorrow, betrayal, and untold loss. But to face it? That might very well be your undoing. Hold on tightly to your fragile light, or watch as it extinguishes, leaving you to join my languishing banquet. As her words curled around me, they held a potent gravity that threatened to crush every flicker of hope left in my heart. I could sense the desperate longing of the guests, felt their grief clawing at the edges of my soul, deepening my connection to their fate. Shadows slithered closer, brushing along my skin like sinister fingers, drawing me toward the center of their growing storm. The ancient voices swirled, reveal the truth, the real secret hidden in your heart, and in doing so, acknowledge the nightmarish power that binds us all. A flash of memory surged before Meth Child's ghostly visage, her eyes wide and pleading, bound to this plight. I reached instinctively for that brief connection, hoping it would anchor me to my humanity, keeping me from spiraling into the darkness. You were once free. I shouted. What did she take from you? What is it that keeps you here? Suddenly, the world lurched as shadows engulfed the bride's form in a tempest of despair, the power within her flaring like lightning in a tempest. Her laughter crescendoed into a spine-chilling wail, a sound that twisted my heart into knots. You think you can command destiny with mere questions? No. You are nothing but a pawn, a flicker caught in the web of despair I crafted. At that moment, everything distorted, walls pulsating like a beast's heartbeat, and the shadows began their cruel dance around me, weaving tighter, stronger. The sensation of losing my grip felt paralyzing, as an awareness dawned that I stood at the brink of something terrifying and profound. Each second clawed at my resolve as I breathed deeply of the air that smelled like forgotten dreams and faded lives, the specters swaying in their torment, their cries rising, and then, in a flicker of consciousness and desperation, I remembered the child's plea. I can't let you fade. I must know the truth, I will reveal it. I shouted, my own voice barely audible against a tide of laughter surging from the bride's lips. Then prepare, dear child, she hissed, for the truth will strip you bare, demanding revelations that may shatter your very essence. Your heart will bleed secrets, and what you unravel may be more horrific than you ever dared to imagine. In that moment of clarity, I felt a strange surge within, a flicker of determination to peel back the layers of this nightmare, no matter the cost. The ground seemed to quake beneath me, and the shadows roared like an unleashed storm, swirling wildly. But before I could question the dark path I was about to tread, a scream erupted from the depths of the hall, a shriek so raw that it seemed to echo through the very fabric of reality itself, reverberating with a truth so heinous it clawed at my sanity. Help us! Help us! She is coming, she is coming! Frozen, my blood turned to ice, an unmistakable terror gripping my heart as the shadows thickened with an insatiable hunger, and the darkness shuddered as if awakening a force long buried. The guests convulsed, their faces now full of dread, signaling the unraveling of a secret too terrible to comprehend, and just when I thought all was lost, a blur erupted behind the bride, a flash of dark, grotesque movement, a shadow within shadows, breaking through the fabric of realish, an entity with eyes like embers, igniting a fear I could not name. As it lunged towards me with haunting grace, ripping apart the veil of existence binding us, I was left with a gut-wrenching choice to make: stay and face the unknown horrors that awaited, or flee into the shadows where my fate would be sealed, fading into oblivion with the lost souls. The air thickened, the shadows howling, and in that frozen moment, the choice became clearer yet more terrifying, for it would reshape the very foundation of everything I had believed. Would I hold firm, unraveling the dark secret, or allow it to consume me and become one of them? And as the shadows lunged, the laughter mingling with the anguished cries of the damned, all hope began to shatter and everything faded to black. I awoke on the cold, hard floor, the last echoes of laughter fading into the oppressive silence of the hall. The air felt heavier, as if soaking in the remnants of dread. Instead of the sinister banquet, the room lay shrouded in stillness, but the weight of anticipation clawed at the edges of my consciousness. I sat up, disoriented, heart racing as I surveyed my surroundings. The shadows had receded slightly, their hunger momentarily quelled but not quenched. An unnatural quiet blanketed the space, broken only by the low murmurs of the trapped souls, whispering unintelligible pleas that slid through the air like ghostly tendrils. You must remember, the chant circled around me, threading through the silence in a haunting dance. I struggled to recall what had happened before. There was a darkness, a scream, the presence of something adjacent to my own existence that felt far too eager to unravel. I pushed myself to my feet, each step pushing against the lingering despair that wrapped around me like an old, damp cloak. The hall had transformed into what felt like a dreamscape swaying between reality and a waking nightmare. Every corner seemed to twist, stretching and looming, as if the very foundation beneath my feet were complicit in the chaos. Why have you come here? The voice cut through the air, sharp and jagged, pulling my gaze toward a new apparition, a gaunt figure, an elderly man haunted by the weight of decades lost and sorrows unspoken. His eyes held a deep abyss, one that spoke of despair and the tales of lives long extinguished. Who are you? I asked, instinctively wary, feeling the shadows clinging tighter as he drew closer, his form rippling like smoke. I am but an echo, he rasped, his voice grating but oddly soothing amidst the madness. One of many who mislaid our truth in pursuit of love or love. He gestured toward the flickering silhouette of the bride, whose essence wavered between worlds. The truth that binds us is more insidious than you realize. It is a cycle that must be broken. What do you mean? I pressed, desperation coloring my tone. What truth? What binds us, the bride, he intoned. She thrived on hope, devouring it until nothing remained, nothing but wrath. Each soul entwined within her light, each decision made in the name of love, becoming shackles of despair. The wedding was more than a celebration, it was a marriage of darkness, a covenant sealing our fates. Panic surged inside me as I absorbed his words. What covenant? How can I help you? I instinctively reached out, grasping at anything that could tether me to my humanity as I felt the precipice of despair looming ahead. His voice trembled, the regret palpable. You must unravel the truth she obscured, the choice made on that fateful day yet forgotten. Ease the heart capable of sacrifice. The room started to shift, swirling shadows pressing against the walls, the laughter of phantom guests rippling forward like tidal waves. I felt drawn toward the bride, the crux of this horror, an invisible string yanking at my very essence. She stood before me, a silhouette roiling with nightmare energy, her expression a grotesque blend of sorrow and malice. Dearest child, you dare to question our covenant? She regarded me with a predatory gleam in her eyes, flashes of incandescent rage simmering just beneath the surface. Do you seek the truth or the glory of your own innocence? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for the sake of those long gone? I only want to understand. I shouted, the desperation surging like a tempest within me. What must I do? The air thickened, charged with impending chaos, her body swirling like a vortex as shadows danced like furious flames consuming everything in their orbit. To understand is to know pain, sweet child. Choose your burden. Let the truth, as vile as it may be, dwell within you. Only then can you set us free or doom yourself in the process. That I stammered, uncertainty splintering my thoughts. Whatever the truth held, I knew it would shatter my perception of love, of life itself. Yet if I refused, I might become just another lost whisper in this cursed hall, forever trapped in their haunting. In that suspended moment, the shadows pressed in, weaving their whispers tighter, echoing a dreary symphony of despair. Embrace the truth, they urged, their collective voices merging into a chilling chant. But before I could grasp the full extent of the choice that loomed before me, the air shifted again, thickened, pulsated with electricity, and the ghastly silhouette of the child from my earlier memory materialized, her form translucent, eyes wide with inescapable knowledge. Help me find the key, she wailed, her voice a ghostly whisper in the cacophony. She took it from me, locked it away in the darkest corner of your heart. And as I reached toward her, an electrifying jolt of realization surged within me, awakening a haunting recollection of my own moments I dared not confront, shadows I longed to forget, the burden eclipsed by fleeting memories that trembled in the recesses of my mind. But suddenly, the shadows surged forward like a monstrous wave, and the presence that haunted the edges of my vision ignited, transforming into a macabre certainty closer than I had feared. The entity with ember-like eyes broke through the darkness, clawing its way toward me, an unearthly silhouette cloaked in rage and sorrow. That I could feel the fangs of fear gnashing at my heart, the room vibrating with screams of those chained to their grief. They implored me to remember, and as the figure grew nearer, its hunger palpable, I realized the depth of the truth I was destined to uncover. The essence of darkness that played upon my heartstrings swelled, demanding to be acknowledged. Remember, remember. The whispers grew frantic, a desperate chorus fading into an ominous crescendo as the figure lunged, the screams rising to a fever pitch. In that moment, as my reality cracked and splintered, the choice crystallized before Medar. I embraced the darkness lurking within, faced the horror it promised, or flee into oblivion, forever haunted by the lost souls and the ravenous truth that awaited. And as I stood there, tethered to both pain and hope, the grasp of the shadows intensified, dragging me toward the darkness that screamed to be unleashed. A chilling realization escorted my thoughts into a realm I had not anticipated, a decisive moment from which there was no escape, and with that horrifying revelation echoing through my being, I felt the shadows consume me entirely, plunging me headfirst into the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows of my own heart. The air pulsed with a thick, electric tension as I sank deeper into the abyss, the darkness wrapping tightly around me like serpentine fingers. I felt as if I were at the center of a cosmic storm, swirling with horrors beyond comprehension, yet within its chaos lay a truth begging to be unveiled. The cries of the trapped souls reverberated in my ears, each voice a blend of hope and agony, mingling in a haunting symphony that urged me to press on, unlock it. The child's ethereal voice echoed in the shadows, her presence swirling as a breath of wind against my skin. The key lies within you, you know it. You just have to remember, but everything felt hazy. Memories flickered like dying embers at the edges of my consciousness, mostly shadows in the corners of my mind, taunting me with their elusiveness. Panic rose, urging me to fight against the overwhelming tide of despair threatening to drown me. What key? I shouted, the urgency clawing at my throat. I don't understand. Suddenly, the bride's mocking laughter erupted within the cavernous hall. Ah, child, bound by the shackles of your own heart, trapped in the very illusions you wish to escape. The key isn't a physical object hidden under a floorboard, it is the weight of your own choices, the unresolved pain from your past. Her words sent ice flooding through my veins. Memories thundered behind my eyes, moments of loss, pain, betrayal swirling in an intricate dance, spurred by the bitter echoes of regret. It was true, I had buried them deep, believing I could erase the impact they had woven into the very fabric of my being, but the truth was an entity of its own lurking, waiting, ever ready to resurface. No, I whispered, trembling at the realization. I can't let that happen. I can't face it. Face it. The bride roared, a tempestuous fire swelling within her eyes. Only then will you understand the true bond that ties us, this wretched web of choices that gives rise to the curse that binds these souls. To break the cycle, you must free yourself. At her words, shadowy tendrils snaked from the depths, wrapping around my limbs like ancient ivy seeking to squeeze the breath from me. Rage and anguish filled the hall. The trapped souls, their lives woven into this tapestry of pain, clamored for release while shadows coiled tighter, pulling me toward the maelstrom of darkness. Help her, urged the child, and suddenly, I could sense a faint heartbeat of recognition that thrummed beneath the surface of all that I had tried to forget. I remembered a promise made, a trust shattered, a memory that resonated with loss. With a fierce determination igniting my spirit, I grasped hold of that memory. I harnessed the moments that had once brought forth pain but could now be my source of strength. The warmth of love long lost surged through my veins, illuminating the shadows that inhabited the room. I could see its truth wrapped in the agony of my heart, articulated in a single thread that interlinked the fates of all bound to this haunted celebration. As the shadows coiled menacingly around me, full of the weight of sorrow, I focused hard on that flickering memory. Tears streamed down my face as the truth finally pierced through the layers of agony I had buried the night I lost my sister, the final minutes of reckless choices leading to a broken bond. I had never forgiven myself for wanting to escape the grief and hide from the darkness that engulfed me then. No more, I spoke, my voice steady as I clung to the revelation. I will not run from you. I embrace the pain, the sorrow, I will carry it within me to set you all free. A blinding light exploded from within, washing over the shadows that had long tethered the trapped souls. They recoiled, shattering into splinters of darkness, and the laughter of the bride full of malice surged forward, ready to drown my attempt at redemption. Foolish child. You think you can break free from this curse that has swallowed every soul here, but I pressed on, harnessing the strength of every ounce of love I had ever known, channeling it into a beacon against her darkness. You are not my master. I choose to remember. The light expanded, cascading like liquid gold across the sorrowful figures of the guests, illuminating their haunted faces, reflecting their painful pasts and broken promises buried in the echoes of the night. Slowly, the chains that bound them began to disintegrate, the tendrils of shadows retreating as they took flight, transforming into whispers of freedom swirling in the radiant light. Join me. I cried out to them, pulling on my memories to weave together a tapestry of collective hope and healing. Together we can face the darkness. Remember the love, the joy, the choices that connect us. not just the pain. With every word, the energy rippled like a shockwave through the hall, the once oppressive atmosphere shifting and morphing into a sanctuary of light. The shadows recoiled in terror, the bright light edging closer to the bride, whose rage transformed into a terrifying mixture of dread and realization. "Stop!" she shrieked, her visage splintering as she wailed, her power unraveling before the surge of collective memories igniting in concert. "You cannot escape the truth," but it was too late. The darkness faded, consumed by the overwhelming strength of the truth unleashed. Whispers of love, joy, and the weight of the years lost surged within the light, enveloping the hall like a protective blanket. I could see the faces of the lost souls transforming as the reality of their shared stories melded into one, freeing them from the shackles they had garnered within this nightmare. In a blinding flash, the dark fabric of this curse was torn asunder, leaving behind only the ethereal remnants, illuminating the once bleak hall with a kaleidoscope of life and memory. As the darkness receded, the bride's anguished wail echoed in the void, fading into an angry whisper that lingered in the air like a dying ember, and just like that, it was over. The guests free began to evaporate into ethereal wisps of memory, their faces once marked by sorrow now transformed into serene smiles, guiding them into the afterlife with the gentle murmur of forgotten laughter. But that's when the true horror unfolded. For as they faded, I felt a cold grip tighten around my heart, a chilling reminder that while I had freed them, I had also fulfilled a far darker prophecy. From the shadows, the chilling laughter of the bride echoed, now resonating with a twisted triumph. "You've set them free, dear child. But remember, the love shared here was never yours to keep. In breaking the curse, you sealed your fate as their tether, anchoring you to this place for eternity. You belong to me now." In that cruel moment, I felt a terrible truth settle heavy upon my heart as my own screams melded with the echoes of despair, a realization that perhaps this was the price of love, and indeed, the real haunting was just beginning. I had freed them, yes, but the darkness that had once enslaved them now thrived within its roots entwined deep within my soul, a possession born of sacrifice that I had naively thought I could escape. As I looked down at my hands, filled with the warmth of the light I thought I had controlled, they began to darken, shadows encroaching and swirling like the tempest of sorrow I had now inherited. The darkness whispered sweet promises, wrapping around me with merciless tenderness. "Together, we shall dance eternally," it crooned, echoing the last remnants of the party and sealing my fate as my laughter merged with the bride's, haunting the shadows of the hall. And so I stood, now tethered not only to their memories but to the very essence of the darkness I had once feared, forever bound to this haunted wedding celebration. Echoes of laughter twisted into a chilling reminder of the heart's darkest needs and the ultimate horror of love eternal.